Assalamu alaikum. How we can, in our everyday life, stay grounded as we serve, as we serve in the way of Allah. And I think that before we can even begin to think about how to lead, let alone how to stay grounded, we have to ask the question, what is my purpose? What is my purpose? Now we're right. It's about to be the new year, and we've just finished a decade. We're about to go into the another decade, and a lot of people are thinking through their goals for the next year, for the next 10 years, and so it's a good time to take stock of this question. What is my purpose? What was I put on this earth to do? And sometimes people feel like when I start here, it's like, well, we already know that. This is so primary. This is so elementary. But I actually think that we often quickly graze over this question without giving it its proper gravity, its proper weight in our discourse, in our lives, in our personal narrative. And I say that because I know there are some brave brothers in the room, so thank you for being here, but I'm going to talk to the sisters directly for a minute here. As sisters, as women, and I don't mean Muslim women, I mean women in general, we are socialized to believe that we should derive our personal worth from our utility to someone else. I often hear people say, this is a wonderful woman, she was such a good mother, such a good wife, things like that. And there's nothing wrong with being a good mother and a good wife. I'm a good mother and a good wife, I hope. I hope someone would say that about me. But these are two roles I do occupy, and I take great pride in that. But when it comes to men, their worth is measured by their contribution in general to the world. And I want you to think about that, because it's how we start to think of ourselves. And where it becomes very toxic is when we aren't able, perhaps, to be a mother or a wife. Do we then become worthless? Are we nothing then? How are we measuring our worth? When God created humanity, men and women, He told the angels, "Inni ja'alun fil ard khalifa." I will put on earth a vicegerent. What is a vicegerent? It's like an old English word. It's one of those words that only Muslims use. We have these like Muslim words. Vicegerent is one of them. Abolition is another one, right? We just have these like monopolies on these like words. So vicegerent, what is a vicegerent? A vicegerent is an appointed representative of the sovereign, of a sovereign. So a king will appoint a, quote, vicegerent to govern an area of their kingdom, like a governor. And that person has to govern according to the will and direction of the sovereign, of the king. So Allah said to the angels that He is putting on earth a vicegerent, someone who has been put on here to act in according to the will of the sovereign, of the King of Kings. And that vicegerent is you. It's you and you and you and me. We're not the staff of the vicegerent. We're not the passenger of the vicegerent as they're driving the car. We're not the audience, the servant, the secretary of the vicegerent. We are the vicegerent. And I know, I always say this, and I'm like, do you really know what that means? Do you understand the gravity and the profoundness, the revolutionary, reality of that statement? Because it is unparalleled in any faith tradition, and I would argue in any ideology period, that we have been put on earth, men and women, with this divine mission. And so when we think about our purpose, when we think about where we derive our identity and where we derive our worth, and who is getting to co-sign on if we are enough, that is the question we have to go back to. Why was I created, and what was my purpose? Who am I here to please? Whose approval is primary to me? And this will govern and decide and clarify so many things in your lives. So many decisions will suddenly become clear when you take it back to this question. Is this bringing me closer to fulfilling my mission or not? Who is the primary benefactor and approver of this action? Where am I deriving my sense of self-worth? If you spend 10 minutes on Instagram, this is like the furthest thing that's going to be in your mind in terms of where we derive our self-worth. There are actual studies that show that time on social media is correlated with depression. It's correlated with negative body image. And it's because we are told in every possible way that we are deriving our self-worth from something so far away from this idea of this divine mission. So before we can do anything, we have to establish this as the foundation. Now, what does this look like in real life? And I'm going to be super practical, okay? It means we have to build into our daily practices that remind us of this reality. So I am not a mental health professional, and I'm not trying to pretend I am, and I'm not playing one on TV or on this stage. But just in general, anyone who's taken a psychology class knows that in the field of cognitive behavioral therapy, what you learn is that your underlying mental models, okay, your sort of autopilot ways of thinking, your thought patterns that are just automatic. They're not things that are even conscious. They're just how you've formed your internal discourse. Whether we're aware of them or not, they drive our emotions, and then those emotions drive our behavior. Now, one thing you will read about is that to alter those things, if they're getting in the way of your life, if they're negative thought patterns, you should practice mindfulness and daily affirmations. And sometimes those are kind of, people make fun of them, like, I'm good enough, I'm strong, I'm good enough, I'm strong enough, or and people like me. It's sort of this joke. But these daily affirmations and this mindfulness has another name in our faith, which is dhikr. Dhikr, remembrance of Allah, is working on the source code, is working on those auto patterns of how we think. It's just like a daily affirmation of reminding yourself to be positive, to be compassionate in the way you talk to yourself. Except it not only reminds you of your purpose twice a day, if you do morning dhikr and afternoon dhikr, but it even has the added benefit of the spiritual protection that it gives you. So whether you're looking at this from the point of view of spirituality purely or science, building into your day dhikr twice a day, and this is in addition to your salah, which if we're struggling with 5 times a day, that's the first thing. And then to build in adhkar, to start to reprogram those auto thought patterns. Because everything else we're exposed to is pushing us in a completely different direction about who is the co-signer on our worth, on what is our purpose, how do we derive validation, what sources do we go to for certainty. And we have to build in these deprogramming practices. They're not extracurricular. At least that's how I feel. For me, they're like medication. If I'm off my medication, I'm not functioning. So dhikr. The other thing that I would recommend as a daily practice in keeping grounded as we're moving forward is to start to read the Quran in a reflective manner. And here's what I mean, and this is very practical. Either get an app that allows you to write notes inside the app for each ayah, or do the old-fashioned thing and just use a notebook. But start to read the Quran as someone who's it's talking directly to, because you are. The Quran's audience, its intended audience, are all of us. Islam is not, there are no passengers on this vehicle to Allah. There are no passengers. We're all drivers. We all have to take an active part in reflecting and understanding our faith and our book. And so read ayahs and reflect. Just write down, what does this make you think of? What does it mean to you? How does it impact your life? Make the practice of engaging with the Quran a personal one. And I'm not saying we're all qualified to do tafsir, and that's not true, and that's not what I'm suggesting. But the Quran tells us to reflect on it. This is what we are commanded to do, every single one of us as believers. So read the Quran if you understand Arabic, great. If you don't, read a translation, read the tafsir, and then write down, engage actively with the Quran. And then third, and I'll stop here and I'll look forward to your questions. Find your tribe. Find your tribe. Get other women around you that will support you in your journey. I heard something so beautiful over the weekend at a class. And it's simply a teaching that go to Allah in crowds. There is a problem, I believe, of us becoming hyper-individualistic in our path to Islam. How many of us stop going to a physical space to engage with any kind of Islamic knowledge? Now it's just like so common that we don't even think about it. We're just watching YouTube, right? That's how we engage. We don't engage with other humans anymore. We don't go to halaqas anymore. No one even knows what that is. Even if there's, Sheikh Omar Suleiman was telling me, probably our best, speaker in America. And he has 20 people sitting in the masjid, listening to him when he gives a talk, and there's like 20,000 on Facebook Live, right? And now a lot of them aren't in Dallas, so that makes sense, but a lot of them are in Dallas. They're just too lazy to go to the masjid. So they're watching on Facebook Live. Yes, it increases access, but it also increases isolation. And we need each other. We need other humans' resonance to strengthen the plausibility of this thing called Islam being true. We need social support to do this. It can't be by ourselves. We have to stop isolating ourselves. So find your tribe. That's the last piece. Jazakallahu khairan.